From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
When a person commits a crime, as we know, that they have the sufficient maturity and intellect to know what they're doing is wrong. If I am 16 and I go out and cause an arson or murder someone, then the law says that I have the mental capacity to understand. What Queensland has done has the age of criminal responsibility has been lowered from 14 to 10. A 10-year-old child, do they understand, the consequences that might flow from that?
I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Welcome back to my chat with Vince Hurley, who uses his experience as a cop and an academic to identify and address issues relating to policing and the criminal justice system in a very pragmatic way. Are you happy with that introduction?
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Did I say it right? That's what you wanted me to say?
Yeah, that's it.
Look, obviously Vince and I have history and we do joke around a bit, but I'm serious when, and I'm saying this to you, Vince, not the listeners, that your opinion on law and order issues do count. Yeah. And I like the view that you take on law and order, and there is so much to talk about. Your passion comes across as your Q&A outbursts that made you a YouTube sensation, embarrass your children. So many other things about crime I want to talk about. Yeah. We left part one talking about domestic violence and the terrible consequences of it. I had a conversation with you before you came on, and I was talking about meeting Hannah Clark's parents and Sue and Lloyd Clark, who are just such impressive people. People who know the name, Hannah Clark and the three children were set alight in a motor vehicle as a result of domestic violence, a horrendous crime. And Sue and Lloyd have been campaigning. I think they part of the thing that they campaigned for was the introduction of coercive control. I've had them on been fortunate enough to speak to them on the podcast, and we're talking about domestic violence. And I made the point to them. I said, if the offender was forced to wear a ankle bracelet, that notified Hannah if he was in 5 kilometres, because there were indicators there, something bad was going to happen. You could see it was building up. And I think that was what everyone's frustration was. Ankle bracelets. Criminologist, ex-cop, you've got opinions on law and order. I just struggle to understand why we don't utilise ankle bracelets. And I just think it's such a simple process that if the victim and the perpetrator, if the perpetrator comes within 5 kilometres, 10 kilometres, whatever radius you want to set, and the victim is notified that person is in the area, it might give them some peace. It might give them some comfort. During COVID, the crazy management of that, we managed to track where everyone went in the country. Get your thoughts. Why can't we adopt ankle bracelets? Am I looking at it too simplistically?
No, you're not. Surprisingly, no. So, you're right about it being a serious issue, but it's just my sense of humour. So.
You were never funny. That's why your career ended. You got thrown off a roof. Do you reflect on why that person threw you off the roof?
No, but I will on the way home. Ankle bracelets. There's a couple of things. And as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago at Rainbow Lodge, it's amazing how, as two former police, and seeing the pit of humanity, how your views change about life and about crime and things like that. And it would be tragic if our views on life and crime didn't change. Yeah, that's what individuals are. So ankle bracelets. I won't give the exact number because I know exactly how many there are in New South Wales, but we're not talking about hundreds, unfortunately. But ankle bracelets are used for medium to high risk offenders who have been identified for violent domestic violence. So there's a couple of things. There are going to be offenders like that bloke in Queensland, and I won't mention his name, who, for whatever reason, you will never be able to prevent from murdering Hannah and the children. They're just recalcitrants, as you would well know. And that's what jail's for, thank God. But no matter if she was wearing an ankle bracelet, having read the coronial report, I don't believe that would have prevented him ended up killing her. If not then later.
Could I just pose that there? What say he had the ankle bracelet?
Yep.
He's been charged with offences.
Yep.
And very strict conditions that if he comes within 5 kilometre radius and he breaches those conditions, and I hate mandatory sentencing, and I'm sure you're of the same view. Every case needs to be adjudicated, but there will be a sentence. And then he gets out and he's got that bracelet on again. If the bracelet gets cut off, he's back in jail. If he comes within 5 kilometres of her and it's not justifiable as in a pure accident, he goes back to jail. Couldn't that circumvent it?
Yes, it could. The thing that people overlook of ankle bracelets is that, as you and I know, that they get cut off. Secondly, the offender, they'll let the battery run out or down. It has to be charged. It's just like a mobile phone. It has to be charged and the battery has to be recharged every, I don't know how many hours it is, but it has to be recharged. So if the offender lets it run out or run down, even accidentally, and I know this has happened in the past, then they can't be tracked because there's no signal being given out.
But, okay, and if that's the case, he's breached it again and he gets charged.
The other thing that they do, and I'll answer the point exactly in a minute, they wrap it in alfoil so they can't be tracked, or they'll put it in another vehicle and that someone will drive out to whoop whoop where they'll lose its signal. So if you look at the east coast of Australia, most of the tracking is on the east coast of Australia because there's a lot of mobile phone towers. But if you went inland, it'd be totally different. So you're right. So if he had breached that, for sure, arrest him, lock him up, and just throw away the key. A surprising thing, and I actually know a man, and I won't say who it is, that actually wears one. And it's not for it's crimes of violence, but nothing for domestic arguments. And he was saying that his partner, when he goes within a buffer zone, wherever that is, and it goes off, and it goes off with her to let her know, it actually causes her a bit of anxiety because she knows that he is in close proximity, whether it be coincidental or not. But she also draws strength from that, knowing that there is a degree of a buffer zone there. But the problem is that there are only X amount, and there's lack of corrective services staff to be able to monitor the ankle bracelets. You would need, and I don't quote me on this figure, but I think there was last year or maybe this year 21,000 breaches of an ABO. Even if you had 10,000 ankle bracelets, it's not going to be enough. And you need people to man that. But I totally agree that any damage to the ankle bracelet, cutting it off, whatever, they should have a mandatory sentence. Absolutely.
And look, I know it comes down to resourcing, but and finances, fiscal, everything comes into play. But to me, I know if someone was stalking me and someone was going to kill me and that person's got a bracelet on and I've got a monitor that lets me know if that person's come, that would give me peace of mind. And if it did go off, he's not going to get me unprepared.
No, that's right.
So I think technology, we've got to embrace it, and I get frustrated because I saw when we're told things can't be done during COVID. That poor bloke that went and tried to buy a barbecue got tracked all around Sydney. It's possible. So I get. I'm starting to sound like you on Q&A. How stupid do you have to be? Sorry, I'm getting whipped up. But
it's true.
I think there's something there that we've really got to, how do we address it? We've talked in part one about, helping men, retrain or focus on development so they don't go down that path. But short term, do that. And you don't get a bracelet first time, it's an offence, but then it escalates. Second offence, bad luck, buddy, you're wearing this bracelet. I don't care if it embarrasses you when you're at the beach.
That's a good point. Because that's a really good point, because if the Bosca, New South Wales Bureau of Crime Statistics and Research, put out a report earlier this year on its effectiveness, and they are effective. And one of the things it said, which I nearly choked on my Wheaties, was that men are worried about being stigmatised. And I thought, well, since when has it ever been about the men being stigmatised? Who cares?
Yeah. Well, I think so. And let's make it bright orange.
Yeah,
Domestic
that's
violence person.
Yeah.
It's really embarrassing.
Yeah.
But anyway, just a thought. Juvenile crime.
Yep.
It's in the media have got hold of that. It's a topic of discussion, but it does really appear that there's a lot of problems going on with juvenile crime. Criminologist, ex-cop, university lecturer, an all-round good guy. Sorry, just checking my notes. How can we address juvenile crime?
So, as a father of 4 teenage children...
Ankle bracelets?
Absolutely. Not one, but 2. And one around their neck. Look, juvenile crime, it always seems to be out of control. Whether that's fact or whether it's media it's hard to know. Certainly... lowering in Queensland to having the age of criminal responsibility at 10, I think is just appalling. I just think that 10 is just...
Is that what they're looking at doing?
Yeah, if it's not already law.
Okay, explain that to the listener, what that
So that means that if... so generally speaking, when a person commits a crime, as we know, that they have the sufficient maturity and intellect to know what they're doing is wrong. Exceptional circumstances, someone suffering mental health issues, for example. So if I am 16 and I go out and cause an arson or murder someone, then the law says that I have the mental capacity to understand the motive and the intent and the consequences of my actions. So what Queensland has done has the age of criminal responsibility has been lowered from 14 to 10. So that means that a person who is 14, if they go out and steal a car or do shoplifting, the law says that they know at 14 the difference between right and wrong. They've got a moral compass. But now in Queensland, it's been lowered to 10. Now, to my mind, as a father of 4 teenage children, a 10-year-old child does not have the developmental capacity or maturity to understand the consequences of their action. Yes, they might know it's wrong to steal or to break into a car or steal a car, but do they understand, the consequences that might flow from that? So what they're saying is that someone who is 10 should be held fully responsible to the law and punished by the law, because they know what they're doing is not only wrong, but it has an impact on society, which I think is just...
It doesn't sit well. Doesn't sit well with me. And even if there is a problem, you're not fixing it by... so you're looking at a 10-year-old?
Yeah. And
you don't comprehend the consequences of your actions at that age.
And just actually taking that similar point, so we talk about intergenerational trauma and violence and domestic violence. Yeah. So I was speaking to a woman a few weeks ago who was in a violent relationship and has left. Her 10-year-old son during the relationship started belting the 7-year-old sister. Now, she made the valid point, and it's true, that he didn't know why he was doing it. He was mimicking his father's behaviour. He knew it was wrong, but he didn't have the mental maturity
comprehend.
Yeah, to know that it was wrong, and now she's worried that he'll end up like her father. Yeah. So when we talk about criminal responsibility and mimicking behaviour, no one at the age of 10, can fully comprehend, as you rightly say, the consequences.
So, partly Queensland's move, it sounds like a political move. We're getting tough. We've lowered the age of the criminal responsibility. Custody with kids, I have a real problem with that, and I know they're the formative years, but I really have a problem. Diversionary programs, I think, is much better for a child. Yep. Your thoughts on that? Once you put them in the system, it's not just their self-esteem, but then the people they're looking up to are the older boys in the system, and look at them, they're causing problems. That's what I'm going to come out and be a real criminal. If you'd asked me that when I was at Mount Druitt in the 1980s, I wouldn't have cared less. I would have gone, we had a saying, and I'm almost ashamed, I tell the kids in class, it's students, almost ashamed to say it, but when I went to Mount Druitt in 1981,
which is a pretty wild place. They said, we had a saying, we never went to work, we went to war.
Yeah.
And straight away, the mindset at the time.
War on.
Yeah, and if you'd said to me about a 10-year-old child at Mount Druitt, or St Mary's or Blacktown or Penrith, where I spent most of my career, I wouldn't have cared less. But now it's maybe because you're a parent, and you look back and you go, wow, the things I should have done or could have done. But I think that you're right. Putting children in, look, it's a fine line. I understand.
The society's got to be protected. We understand that.
Yeah, and we also understand that the kids have to be held responsible. Yeah. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But you're right about it being a political issue about locking up children when you rightly say that there are diversionary programs in place. Now, I think, and I didn't look at this, but when I was at the drug summit, there was a figure quoted, and don't quote me on this, even though I'm going to say it publicly. I think that for every $1 spent on rehabilitation, it saves the government something like $5 or $7.
Okay.
But the problem is that the governments don't, because we mentioned political cycle, they don't see a short-term result from that, but it needs to be long-term investment. I think any parent who raises children know it's a challenging time, but you're right, kids have to be held responsible for their actions. And just going back to the point I made earlier about when I speak to the children at school and at uni about domestic violence, take the word domestic out of it, boys need to be told that you just cannot hit women. It's just not on.
It's no go.
No.
Yep.
And you have to be blunt. And having twin sons who are 18, they are different from their sisters.
Yeah.
And I think boys have to be told bluntly, you just cannot bloody well do it. It's just not on. It's just under no circumstances can that be done.
Yep.
And boys, I think, are hardwired, and I could be wrong, differently from women. That it has to be a clear message. And even when and then just going back to the earlier point about moving the word domestic from the violence, when you talk to the kids at school and at uni, even the word sexual violence, they focus on the word sexual rather than the violence. But we know why they call it sexual violence, because that's the way that the Crimes Act defines it, and it adds an extra layer of depravity to the crime. So again, with the boys, it doesn't matter how young they are, there need to be boundaries. They need to be told. You just cannot hit women under any circumstances.
Well, the role model is so important in a young boy's life, and you've got to set the standards. But that's the type of thing that we're looking at. With diversionary role models. Role models are critical. The amount of people I have sitting in here whose life has gone off track has turned their life around because of a good role model. Or you say, where did it go wrong? They had no one steering them in a direction. I think the figures are, and again, don't quote me on it, it might have even come out in one of the speeches at Rainbow Lodge, that to keep a adult person in custody over 12 months is $150,000. Juvenile is $250,000. That's a shitload of money that could set up some really good programs. People who have got the lived experience, people who have gone in the dark side or done the bad things and come out, and having these kids look up to them and tell them this is not the go. You can get the trade. You can be part of society. And self-esteem, because self-esteem is what I see with a lot of kids that go off track. They haven't got a good self-esteem because of the environment they've grown up, even education. How many times, and you would have seen it in the cops, when you got some poor bloke, you charge him with an offence and he's too embarrassed because he can't read or write. Things like that. And so they lash out. They lash out at school because they're having trouble reading and writing. So they deflect from it by getting into trouble and sent out of the class.
Yep, exactly right. Illiteracy is amazing. You wouldn't think in 2025 or 2024, 25 that would actually be an issue at all. But it is surprising. Just talking about people going off track. It's interesting that, if you took that bloke who was at Rainbow Lodge who gave that talk, he would be a fantastic role model because of his life. He is outstanding. So he obviously veered off the track and did whatever he did, and now he's a role model. So if a child is raised in an environment of violence, as domestic violence, and even if they come out of that, if they've been exposed to it long enough as a child and they're brought out of it, the slightest stress or trigger in their life after that event could easily steer them off the rails into a life of crime or drugs and alcohol and violence. So when we're talking about the formative years of children, it is really so important that even if they are removed from that environment, the damage is done. Because once you've seen domestic violence or violence, you can't undo it.
Yeah.
You can't undo it. And those poor kids who see it, who are terrified by it, it stays with them for the rest of their life.
Yeah, they've got to break the cycle. And the things that we talk about, it's about getting smart on crime, not tough on crime. Yeah. And, when you speak to victims, and victims that have been through the ringer and have lost loved ones, if you reduce crime, you reduce victims. So that pub talk, you're gone soft, you're going soft on crime. If you reduce crime, you reduce victims.
Yeah.
That's a smart way of approaching it.
Yeah, and not only that, like crime's coming down in society for decades. And of course, the media cycle, the media pick up on it. And I asked the students in class, is crime going up or down? And they always say crime's going up. Yeah. But in actual fact, it's coming down. But even though it's coming down, it's still not acceptable.
Yeah.
But, the impact and the cycle of violence and how, kids are speared into it. But it is, and you and I and many people, we hear the rhetoric. And I used to believe it, tough on crime. I used to believe it.
I know what you're saying, Vince. I'm just not owning up to it. But I know how ignorant you were early in your police career. Let's stuff them, throw away the key.
Yeah, yep. Like even decriminalisation of cannabis. So I was at the drug summit. I am, surprisingly, for it to a point.
Yep.
I'm a massive fan of pill testing. I think that it should be a health issue. I'm not saying that, for example, someone at a music festival, if they've got one tablet, that's okay, but if they've got 5 or 10, obviously that's going to be a supply issue. Yeah. And I'm certainly not saying that, drugs should be allowed to come into the country freely. No way. There's absolutely no way. But I think that the reality is that there will be a portion, as we know, of people that always use drugs, and if that can be managed from a health perspective, that's great. I actually more worry about the mental health impact of cannabis for schizophrenia than I actually do about any other crime aspect of it. And the notion that, cannabis leads to harder crime, that it leads that doorway open, it's an urban myth. It doesn't. Yeah. It just doesn't do that.
But you're raising the issue of the pill testing, and I know if any teenagers I know are going to a concert, I'd prefer to have that than not have that because of the tragedies that can happen. Okay, we've talked about crime. Let's talk about policing, contemporary policing. Why, not just in New South Wales, I think it's across the country, and I think it's overseas as well. We're having trouble attracting people to policing. What do you think that's about? What's your sense of that?
I think, first of all, I just think it's part of it is just the nature of what's the word I'm looking for? The temporary nature of employment now, that people go from job to job to job to job.
Whereas before, policing was a vocation.
Yeah, it was a vocation. It was a career. I also think that because of the fear of crime, so people fear crime more than the reality of crime. It's because people fear crime. People would never walk down a dark alley. Yeah. But in actual fact, probably nothing will ever happen to you.
So but the fear of crime is worse than the
reality of crime. So when you talk to parents, and when I talk to students, and I talk to thousands over the years, the policing's dangerous. But I say, policing's not that dangerous. It is, but you don't get thrown in at the deep end. You're trained. You're not left on your own devices. So that notion that crime is out of control, I don't think really attracts individuals to the organisation. Yeah. I also think that adverse publicity doesn't really help. And one can go into whether there's good or bad leadership in a police organisation.
One could, Vince.
Bloody hell. One could go into whether it's good or bad leadership in the organisation, which then reflects upon, people's attitudes, whether they want to go in. I also think that, emerging economies, like the gig economy, well, it's not emerging, it's already here, and renewables. But I just think that I think the police look, take that thing at Cooma, just tragic, that just beyond comprehension. That does not do anything to attract people to the police.
No, well, that one event, and we're talking about
one event, that's right.
The elderly lady that was tasered and died as a result, and I think it's a matter that's just come before the court, and there was a verdict, so we won't go into the exactly what happened, because I don't think the sentencing's occurred at this stage. But I look at incidents, and you've looked at a lot of critical incidents. I oversaw a lot of critical incidents, and I think there needs to be better training for police. I won't break it down, because it's quite frightening when you talk about how often you get to use your weapon and training and all that. But surely, with the type of job that we're doing, or we were doing as police officers, more money should be put in the training. You want quality over quantity.
Yeah. And I was talking to Darren Bennett, a few weeks ago actually, and he was saying, it's the people coming through the door. If you get the right people coming through the door, then the organisational issues aren't as big. Now that's an obvious statement to make. But the point you made earlier about people getting accepted and then those being rejected, and when there's a shortage, then bringing those other people back in. That's not a consistent benchmark. And whilst it might, in the short term, politically seem palatable for the electorate and for the commissioner or whoever it is, down the track when the politicians and the commissioner go, then the organisation's left with this legacy of then trying to mould but less suitable individuals into something that the organisation really does want. So
like even in the we have that probationary period. And and I know there's people there that should not be police officers. You can tell it a mile away. Why do they call it probationary period and they get through?
Well, that's exactly right. And I think this comes also down to the industrial relations laws, and the onus is upon the organisation to prove that Vince Hurley was incompetent, and Vince Hurley was very incompetent.
That's why you were thrown off the roof, and then you didn't have to go through industrial relations.
Right.
Get this bloke out of here. Sorry, Vince, it's tragic, and I shouldn't be laughing at it. Did you scream on the way down?
Oh, actually, no. To be honest, I was on the ground, and I just, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
And I was on the ground, and I fractured my left leg and my skull, and I dislocated my shoulder, and I'm lying on the ground, and I'm thinking, this is fucked. This is fucked. This is not me. This is fucked. I'm getting too old to chase people half my age. So I was not in a good place. But anyway,
we're not laughing at you. We're laughing with you. We're full support, and we're just trying to say why we can't get police, and here you are discussing. Well, when I got thrown off the roof, look, I love it as a career. I know you enjoyed your time there. I enjoyed it. It saddens me that they're struggling to get resources. Pay increase, but there's a lot of areas that need money going into it. What worries me that will attract people just for the money. And I like to work with people when I was in the cops. I like to work with people that weren't focused on promotion, weren't focused on how much overtime I can get, were focused on, they were passionate about their job. That's the only thing I worry about with this huge pay increase that New South Wales Police have got. You're going to have people that stay in there that are not really interested in policing, they're just taking the dollar. Or encouraging people to go there that are not really interested in policing.
Look, you're right. I was staggered. With the pay increase. I couldn't believe it. I thought I misheard it when I first read about it.
You tried to re-enlist?
I did. When I walked in on my crutches, I said, no way. But I couldn't believe it. Like, that's a phenomenal increase. I'm not saying that, we were poorly paid, in the 80s, but you never joined, as you rightly said, for that particular reason. But, I would, and this is, will probably be an unsurprising comment. I would rather see that money going to drug and alcohol counselling or mental health or domestic violence. Because if you can prevent that, as we know, then be less police. As I said, in the 80s, I went with a bloke named Chris Clark, Shadow, and we were working at Mount Druitt, 20 domestics in one night. Now, admittedly, it was in the 1980s and you just churned through them. But that massive increase in wage, I think, as we said earlier, if that could be put into diversionary programs or something like that, it would have to, you wouldn't see an immediate thing, but if we're talking about generational change or even a decade, it would have to be more beneficial, because people will come into the organisation, as you say, they'll join for X amount of time and then leave.
Yeah.
But if that money was put into drug and rehab and you could get better role models, then it would have a better impact on society.
Well, I like to see police people want to do it because they're inspired by working with those people. You would have had people you looked up to. I looked up to people, and I'm just thinking I want to try to emulate what they've achieved in their career and the type of people they are. I think that's so important that in policing, and I've been away from it a long time too, so I'm only looking from the outside. But it just saddens me that people aren't putting their hands up, because I still reckon it's the world's greatest job.
Oh,
it's in so many different things, and the rewards that you can get from it. And it's a difficult job now. Like, I understand it's difficult now because the exposure and the criticism. If someone does something wrong, they're exposed publicly, because we make mistakes, and you learn from your mistake and move on. You mentioned the leadership. I don't like the we've got the commissioner now, Karen Webb. I just get the sense that she's not being supported by her own organisation, and that troubles me, because I know the internal politics in the cops, how they climb over each other, and that saddens me, because really, when you're out of the cops, you realise the public don't give a fuck.
No, they don't.
Who is the next superintendent, or who is this, or who is that? They don't care.
No.
You think within the cops, everyone is going, who's going to be the next commissioner? People don't care.
No.
But they just want the police to
do their job.
On that, I often get asked about what makes a good police force, and the way I look at police, you're public servants, so you're there to serve the public. So when you talk satisfaction in regards to police, are they delivering what the community they're serving expects? Is that a good way of assessing the?
It is, and I also think that's an interesting point, because when we talk about confidence in policing and how do you make sure that people are satisfied? First of all, when we're talking about, say, closing the gap, every time, and I never thought of this at the time, it's easy to say now in hindsight, whenever you deal with the First Nations people or someone from culturally diverse background, every time you deal with them and give them attend their needs, you're giving them what they want, the expectation. That is part of closing the gap. So everyone has a responsibility to do that. But I also think that there will never be, unfortunately, enough people of First Nations or culturally diverse background in the police, because it just doesn't attract individuals generally. And then even those minority groups are never going to be are not going to be represented, because they just don't attract those individuals for whatever reason. So from the very beginning, I think there's always going to be a gap between what people expect from culturally diverse background or from First Nations and what the organisation can deliver. But I also think that you're right. It's just it's not even giving a level of service. It's just informing someone, or saying, well, if that person was my mum, what would she expect?
That is so simple. Simple way. You would have heard me when I'm talking to detectives, training detectives, that treat the victims like you'd want your family to be treated. It's a simple concept, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, exactly right. But I can also understand, and I'm not making excuses, I can also understand that, when you went to a domestic, and I would be ashamed now to think how many times, and it's a generation ago, how I didn't meet the expectations of people. But even now, I think sometimes people overlook the fact that when a police officer goes and speaks to a victim, they don't care if that police officer, and they don't know, has just come from a cot death or a fatal motor vehicle accident. So I'm speaking to you as a victim, and all you're worried about, and understandably so, is that Vince Hurley gives you and meets your needs. But sometimes expectations of what the police can do are high, and that the police can't meet it, or your expectations are not realistic, and you don't know that because you've never had anything to do with the police before. And Vince Hurley comes to you at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm fatigued because I've been out for 10 hours driving around, and then you go, well, he didn't seem very interested. So I can understand from that perspective. Now, that's not an excuse, it's just human nature. But you're right, if you could police were just more compassionate, and probably some of them are. They probably are, but it's going back to the very first question of, I think, at the very beginning. What is the expectation? What is the role of the police in society? I said, it's to be a referee, but it's to have a degree of compassion at the same time. But I think that when I joined and when you joined, it was a different mindset to what it is now.
It's definitely changed, but I think the core values need to stay with it, because otherwise it becomes problematic. And because, as you identified, that people have a shorter career, they go in 5 years of police, they walk around, go to the next thing. You want to attract the people that are really passionate about their job. And it doesn't matter which, it could be I don't want to encourage them too much, but they do an important job, passionate highway patrol officers. But, you've met them, and they're as passionate as you and I were as detectives, doing what they do. You need that. Yeah,
and I think, actually, that's a good point, because when you think about the people that have a contact with the police, there's only four groups: offenders, victims, witnesses, and those pulled over by the highway patrol. And they are the largest percentage. So the straight away, the stereotypical or the mindset, well, I got pulled over by the highway patrol, they're representative of the rest of the police. I mean, people will always, if I want to join the police, they will want to join the police. But generally speaking, everyone's concept of what the police are is amplified by the highway patrol or by the media.
That's their exposure. Speaking of media, the role of media in policing, what's your take on that? Looking from an outsider's point of view now.
Yeah, I think it's good and bad. I can honestly I can honestly tell you, Gary, if social media was around when I was in the police, I would have been sacked. I would have been absolutely sacked. But we're looking at it retrospectively now, and people coming into the organisation would be more tech savvy, and would be aware of the media around policing. What was the question again?
About media and policing, and the relationship between the media and the police, and the changing landscape with social media.
So I think that when I've given interviews on TV or whatever, they always say to me before we start, all we want's a 10-second grab. And that's what they concentrate on. And they'll take the words that Vince Hurley says either out of context, and they'll use that, or they'll keep it as is. So the media...
like when you were telling the politicians they're absolute jokes... That was taken out of context?
Well, maybe not that one.
Sorry,
I'm proud to say that.
I've interrupted.
But that's a good example, because that whole clip was compressed. I said more than that, and I went on to actually talk more about those particular issues. But that was compressed for social media.
And that's the grab. And that's
the grab that they want. And it's been of benefit, for a whole host of NGOs. But I also think that the media, and everyone says this, and it's true, they have a responsibility to portray both sides. Because one of the questions I asked in an assignment is that, is it true, something along the lines of to the students, is it true that the media portray police in good light or bad light, and is it necessary to do that? And they really come up with interesting answers, because yes, police have to be held accountable for what they do. Social media is fantastic at that, but it also can be prejudicial to the police. It can also be prejudicial against the police as well. So social media is just this unwieldy beast, and I'm not on social media at all for that reason, because it just never raised.
But it is a changing landscape, and the media and the police had a very close relationship when we were in police, and the media were getting information leaked to them, and it was. I had an issue, and I still have an issue that quite often it's a positive news story for the police. There's certain journalists that would be holding to the police, giving them leaks of information, and it frustrates me. Stories that I know, investigations that I know, the William Tyrrell matter has played out so devastatingly in the public for so many different people, and it's been misinformation. And I think there's a responsibility on both sides, but I think the police need to be accountable for their actions. If there's criticism, well, you got to cop it. You get the compliments if you do something good. If you do something bad, you got to cop it. But I see the police just so risk adverse of getting criticised, whereas,
Yep.
and I'll reference Barraville. The Commissioner, Scipione, came up there and to the Barraville community. I'd been trying for 10 years to get the Commissioner to come up there, and he came up there and he said sorry to the community and said we could have done better. That's acknowledging it, and that helped the community at that time. So it meant so much to them. Little things like that, and I don't know why the police don't put their hands up sometimes and just, okay, we could have done that better. Because then you can move on from it.
Yeah, and not only that, the public know. The public know. Just like, it's just like the politicians get asked a question and they give an answer and they think that the answer might be smart or they don't address the question. But the rest of the world knows what the answer is.
Yeah.
It's just like, what's that saying? The emperor wears no clothes or something. Yeah. What is wrong with sort of putting up your hand and say, look, I'm sorry, we could have done better. But you're right, they are so risk adverse that it becomes almost boring and predictable. And even that notion of being risk averse doesn't attract people to the organisation because it makes the organisation look so bland.
Yeah.
What is wrong with getting up and saying, look, I'm sorry, we got it wrong?
Yeah.
Because the punter at home knows that it's wrong. And they can say, they look at the politician or the police officer and or whoever it is, the commissioner, and say, well, why don't you just say it? We all know it.
Yeah.
What's wrong with it?
I know. We could manage it better. And I think they better get their act in order because like with podcasts and all that, Teacher's Pet and other podcasts and even the one that's running at the moment on William Tyrrell, Witness William Tyrrell, it's not just towing the police line and making people call into question what's gone on with an investigation. Gone are the days where, and I'm not just talking New South Wales Police, I'm talking across the board, law enforcement agencies can control the media because it's gone. It used to be that way, but it's no longer that way.
And and that's an interesting point because the media policy, what we used to know, you comment on facts and speeding and things like that. And even now when the police get up and they talk about a particular issue, it is very factual, but there is no humanity or there's no
no personality.
No.
And I think when we look at how we're attracting police, when everyone's just standing up and talking like a dummy, that sounds like a really good job. Inquiries are continuing. We expect an early arrest. Bring some life to it.
Yeah, exactly right.
Maybe that attracts people, but I just so saddened by the fact that we're not getting people because the more people that want to get into the police, the higher the bar can be.
Yeah.
And then one thing, full credit to New South Wales Police, but it was about time, and you'd know, having worked down the academy, the ludicrous situation where you had to pay to go to the academy, and now at least the intake they're getting paid.
Yeah.
That's going to attract a better group of people.
It is.
Right from
You're
the
right.
start.
And in actual fact, you're spot on. That's the point I was going to make earlier, and I forgot to mention it. You're right. Why would someone who wants to do a job go and have to pay HEX fees to join an organisation?
It did not make sense.
No, a tradie doesn't pay.
I've had so many good people approach me and say, I was going to join the police, but I couldn't afford because I've got young children that couldn't afford to pay the time down the academy. Good people that would have made excellent police officers, and we've lost them.
I fear that once they get to they fill their vacancies, I think it will revert back.
Oh, let's hope not.
Let's hope not. I know. I have no idea.
We'll get you back on I Catch Killers and you can have one of your rants and raves and your 27 billion YouTube views because you've lost your shit.
Oh, God.
Modern policing, and you mentioned AI. I look at AI, that will be a tool in criminal investigation. Because, I would imagine, set it up right, there's break and enters, you're looking at methodology. You scan it, within 30 seconds it's come back, okay, there's a similar break and enter. What's your thoughts on AI?
Love it. A big early adopter of it.
Would have been easier when you're at a uni student. Not that they would use AI.
No, of course not. I actually let them use it.
Well, I've wondered about that. Yeah. But you've got to let them have access. That's a resource like when we used to go to the library and borrow a book. It's a resource that's available. So it's got to be allowed in there. Imagine having people go through uni and not know how to use it AI.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I mean, look, I'll get backtrack in a minute, but I got friends sit on state and Commonwealth in interview panels for government jobs, and one of the questions that many government, like Commonwealth government jobs, will ask if they get to an interview is, what is your AI literacy skills?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a
question. Yeah. So, and all the big like KPMG and PricewaterhouseCoopers and EY, they ask those questions about the students. What do you know about AI? And what's your literacy skill? Can you tell between good and bad?
Yeah.
But so AI, I think that it has benefits, obviously, and it has disadvantages. The thing with AI is that it is, because it's Microsoft, for example, OpenAI was initially owned by Elon Musk, and he not sold it, but he works with Microsoft. That's why it's on our computers in Microsoft. It's US based, so all the information is from the Northern Hemisphere. So if we type in something like, I did some research on suicide by cop in Australia, and it came back with information which was incorrect about Australia because it's all Northern Hemisphere based. So that's the first thing that people have to understand, is when they use it, primarily it comes from scraping the web of all the Northern Hemisphere information. So that's the first danger or pitfall of it. The second thing with AI, and it concerns me, there was a case in Ohio, might have been last year or year before, or anyway, in the States, where there was a police used AI to identify an offender. So they visually identified him, but they didn't know his name. Then they used AI and they put the name, and the name was correct, and went to court, and he was convicted for purchasing a handgun, I think it was, and then it was actually thrown out later on. It was challenged on the basis of AI, that AI was used to identify the offender.
So they had the face, did you say, or they had the face?
They had the
put
face,
that on.
and they didn't know his name.
Okay.
So they used AI to identify who he was.
Yeah.
And AI identified him correctly as Gary Jubelin.
Yep.
So then they went around and arrested him. They didn't arrest him initially. It's a long judgment. And then they went around and arrested Gary for this handgun purchase. Gary pleaded guilty, went to court, and I can't remember what happened to him. Anyway, after he pleaded guilty, the defence appealed that decision based on AI. And the conviction was quashed. The reason it was quashed is that when you use AI, there's a thing called the black box. It's a notion or a concept that is used, that when you type something into AI, you don't know how that answer is arrived at. So because you do not apply any critical analysis to that answer, you're accepting that answer to be 100% correct based on what?
And you're breaking that down in simplistic terms. You've got no reasonable suspicion to...
Exactly right.
Yeah.
There was no independent critical thought or analysis or independent identification of that individual, and it set a precedent in the US.
Okay, that's interesting, isn't it? It's going to be interesting times on how that plays out.
Yeah.
I think with AI, we're fortunate in that where we've got to at this point in time, we've learnt our skills. So if we use AI, we can sort of assess it pretty quickly, because we know what. I asked AI to do a fact sheet on a murder, I could scan through and go, no, that's not what's needed in there. People maybe don't develop those skills because AI is so readily available. But I think it'll be fascinating. Like technology in policing too, it's changed. I think it's a harder gig being a crook these days than it was back in our day, because of all the advantages we got. You did a paper or you did a talk on drones. Yeah. That interests me.
Yeah. Can I just go back to AI for a sec?
Yep.
So when I gave a talk recently about AI and policing, someone in the audience said, well, it's got to be good for identification of a weapon, for example, or clothing, or a scar, or a tattoo. And I said, yes, it has its place there. But I also see it as a bit of a danger, because you don't want the weapon to be so similar. You don't want it to mirror the weapon, because if you identify the incorrect weapon, for example, the matter could be tossed out. So AI can be that accurately cloned,
Yeah.
is that it narrows the ability of the individual to identify, like a lineup. If everyone is too similar looking, yes, it has to be similar,
Yeah.
and you have to be able to justify the selection of the individual. But I think I worry about AI cloning things that are so identical that it's hard to say, or it's hard. But also from the fact that if you get to the witness box, I say, Vince Hurley, now explain to us about AI. How did you arrive at that decision? What did AI do? I go, fuck, I don't know how AI did.
And you will be exploited that way, won't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
The defence barristers are going to jump straight in on that.
So why would you introduce AI into a brief where A, you don't know much about it yourself, and B, you know that it's going to cause controversy?
Yeah.
So I think that, yes, it absolutely.
It will evolve, but
It will,
I
absolutely.
remember, when we're looking for a suspect, and we've got a suspect on a case, and I go through the cops' records and find out what we've got, have someone look for that. And then some young smart ass on the strike force will go, oh, this is where he lives, that's a picture of his house, because they're on social media.
Yeah.
And, how did this happen?
Yeah.
But I would imagine it'll evolve like that.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
it will become a tool.
Absolutely.
But, it's something, and I'd like to think law enforcement, we stay ahead of the game if we can. So hopefully it plays out that way. Winding back to the drones. What's your...
Look, I think drones are going to be as common, if not already common, as the car on the road. The thing that with drones is that now take Kerry Whelan matters. That's finished, isn't it? Remember that? Yeah, that's well and truly done and dusted.
Yep.
So if memory serves me correctly, at some stage there was aerial surveillance of him.
Yeah.
Now, there was a person in a helicopter, in a Polair helicopter, which was out of view of thing, and they surveilled. And surveillance helicopters, as we know, it's quite common. And he had the visual image of that individual. The thing with drones is that it has a visual image of that individual. And I could be sitting at the Aviation Command at Bankstown managing it. But drones have a limited lifespan.
Yeah.
And they're not... they are subject to bird strike, just like planes are.
Yeah.
But also the wind can affect their clarity on the particular target. Now, just like Polair, the target can't necessarily see the drone, but it saves immense amount of manpower and for crime scene, as you would well know, but also for surveillance of individuals, for dropping off resources or something to an individual. Yeah. The biggest thing I think the police are going to face is the CASA regulations. So they have to comply with the Civil Aviation Authority regulations about flying drones. And given the churn of police in the organisation, everyone has to be, well, not everyone, but they have to be continually trained as a drone pilot to keep pace with that. Yeah. So they use it, as you know, on my brother's a surf lifesaver up in Queensland. They have an individual who does that for sharks, and the same thing can be applied to that. Yeah. But it can certainly save a lot of staff and manpower with the use of drones. My only concern would be that if something happened to it, even though it's been back, if something happened to the drone, and because they're worth about $1 million each, the ones New South Wales Police have, if it was damaged or compromised, then the possible continuity of evidence.
Possibly.
Yeah, possible continuity of evidence.
I was just interested in that because just before the end of my career and I won't mention the investigation, but it was high profile and looking for someone walking through the bush and seeing where they went, and we didn't have the capabilities to track this person, and I said, well, we got those drones that get up there and look at crime scenes and all that, and I've done some work with media where they got drones hovering over your head, and we use that drone, and I just thought it just opened a whole new way of doing things police-wise. Exciting time for policing, but we're not in it anymore.
No.
You got thrown off the roof and I got thrown under the bus. a Who would have thought our careers ended that way when we're lecturing detectives?
God, gee.
But you know what I find, and I've loved the chat, and I reckon I'm going to get you back on, because next time you snap, I'm going to get you straight back on the next day and find out what set him off this time. But I like the fact that the way you look at crime, and look at crime not just black and white, good guys, bad guys. You're looking at it and making a difference, educating people on it, and the fact that you enjoyed your time in policing, because I really like sitting down with someone that, you know, it didn't end the way we thought it would.
Not bitter and twisted.
But not bitter and twisted, and can enjoy it. And, you know, I can ask you the obvious question, would you recommend joining the police?
Oh, look, I loved it. Yeah, I do. And even the students at uni say, and I tell them, it's a fantastic job. It is. It's genuinely a great job. Yeah. You know, it's you see the best of humanity, and you see the worst of humanity. Every day's different. I would any of my children, I would recommend it. And when I speak at open days to 800 parents, invariably I'll get some parents who put up their hand and say, would you recommend? And I say, yep. I say, absolutely. I would recommend it to my children. I'd recommend it to anyone. And it's a great job.
Okay, we're going to just cut that, and that's going to be an advertisement for policing in this country. Vince, thanks so much for coming on, and I'm not joking. We will get you back on, because I'm sure you're going to stuff up somewhere and go off on a tangent. But the work that you do is very, very impressive, and you're always good fun when our paths cross in the police.
Mate, I just want to say thanks so much for the opportunity. It's been fantastic, and you know. Yeah, look, it's been a wonderful journey for both of us, and, you know, back in the mid-1990s, who would have ever thought we would have ended up here? But, it's just been great, and thanks for the opportunity. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Cheers.
Thanks, mate.
Vince always brought a smile to my face, and I like his opinions on all things law and order. He's got those street smarts, he's got a sense of humour, he cares, he's passionate, and he's also a bit of an academic. So it was really good sitting down, having a chat with Dr. Vince Hurley. I think he's someone I might get back on here, because I'm sure he's got some other opinions about all things law and order.